But first, I wanted to thank everybody and congratulate you for being here and ready to share your story to help other people on their cancer journey, because that's the objective, is to help others. And we're excited because you're going to learn how to construct the story so that it has impact and it resonates and gets it really interesting. I wanted to do an upfront note of two things that in terms of what Peggy and I are doing this, and as part of it, Peggy and I are writing a book about the emotional side of cancer. So as part of my research, I talked to a doctor here that's working with Columbia University. And they're going to start having doctors take classes to get into the person's story to better understand the patient. And she's thrilled to death with what we have done so far and says it's just so helpful when patients tell their stories, not only to their doctor, but they tell their story to other patients and they feel the patient feels understood and feels that they're helpful and they get insights. So I want you to know that you're going to provide invaluable resource information, hints and tips, and make the journey less challenging and make people feel supported. And it'll inspire them and give them hope. So we know, Peggy and I know, when you see or hear the reaction to your story and see how it helps somebody else or their family or a friend, then you're just going to feel so great about it. Peggy and I've seen this, and I've seen people become emotional, so is Peggy, and cry with joy because they say, oh, we can overcome it, we can survive, we can do this. Oh, thank you. So I want you to know you're really going to be a big help. Now, let's see. Next, what I want to do, I organized this. So it's important to have the workbook or at least a pencil and paper handy because you want to make some notes about doing this. Even though we're going to put the slides up, you want some notes. And the way I decided to do it to help you is describe the basics of a good story. Then I'm going to take you through the steps to ensure that the story is compelling and it makes the desired point. And a little background on this, I always told stories when I sold. And when I was a sales rep for Xerox, I sold the machines that print your Visa bill. I sold to Exxon for their credit card bills and their income tax. So I always told them stories, and that helped me do multi-million-dollar sales. And I got more and more interested. So when I retired out of Xerox and started my own business, I went back and forth to California to really learn about storytelling. Now, every time I watch a movie, I go, oh, okay, I know what they're going to do here. But it helps you really make it compelling. So I'm going to help you with using the right emotional words for impact and how to get attention. And I'm going to give you some examples of good story so that you can see what I'm talking about as a real life example. Understand there are people who really need to hear your story, and we want you to help them and reach out to them. So please take it seriously and do the story when you're finished. And because doing is the highest level of learning, that's why I have the study guide and I have the forms so that you will write out your story. And then you'll tell it to some friends or family members and they'll give you feedback. And in the next session, we'll give you feedback. Anybody that wants to test any part of their story or the whole story on us will give you feedback. Now, Peggy, I wanted you to, let's see, I should be able to, there you go. Okay, and how is everybody going to communicate with us?
There is at the bottom of your screen a chat button, and if you will put any of your questions in the chat button, then I will ask Phyllis your questions, because it's very hard for her to run the meeting and present and move the slides, so I'll be happy to do that.
Great, thanks. I appreciate your help, Peggy. Okay, so let's start. The stories about events in your life and your cancer journey have shaped who you are, and they allow you to create a powerful connection with people that you either tell your story to, or if you write it and someone reads it. And it helps patients and caregivers relate and see a hopeful future or make things easier for them. which is a big objective. So as we move through, we're going to stop and ask you to take some notes on some important points, and we'll help you pull out the important messages and organize your story so that it has a good flow and that it's meaningful. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that we all use the same definition of what's a good story. Because it's not just retelling a series of events or a list of facts, because sometimes people tell a story and they go, and then, and so, and it's just a long list of things that happen. A good story not only contains those facts that occurred, but it has details and emotions and words in it that compel people to pay attention and to give them an insight, or gives them that, oh, an aha moment where they see something, it clicks for them mentally. And that's what you want to do. So you need to have a goal or a purpose in mind when you begin your story. And it's because your purpose is to do one of the kinds of things like give hope, maybe help somebody understand what options are available. How about some hints and tips? Some of the things like Peggy and I made a list, just an easy thing. They never tell you when you go to the hospital what to bring to wear. They say, bring something comfortable to wear home. Well, then you show up with a t-shirt or a sweatshirt and you're having breast cancer. And afterwards, you can't put your hands up like this over your head to put the sweatshirt on. And they go, nope, somebody's going to have to go home and get something else or down to the gift shop. Well, if you tell somebody ahead of time, they go, thank you, I can at least bring the right thing when I go. So what we want to do is get stories organized to help handle the challenges and give people hints and tips. And to put facts in context so that people have an understanding, or maybe it'll help them come to a decision that they have to make. And I tell people, constructing your story is like a vacation. You need to know where you're going so you can make the best plans. So before we get into the details, I'm going to look at the types of stories that you can tell, right? Some stories are, I've been diagnosed for cancer, so now what do I do? Or you might want to share with somebody how you overcame one of the particular challenges during your journey. Or you tell them things you did to reach your goal, or how it changed you. I know I'm not the same, and I know Peggy's not the same. So I'm sure you're not either. It changes you. You want to tell a different type of story or tell your story with a different purpose, depending upon where you're telling it and who you're telling it to. So in your study guide, I gave you a page that has who's your audience, and you can just make some notes for yourself as to who the audience is, and it will help you focus your story for that person. So when you tell it, you need a vision or a purpose, why you're telling it and what the image is. So we're going to show you the structure and give you the tips that the Hollywood screenwriters use and the great professionals that teach stories. So let's look at the building blocks and the ingredients of it. I like this, share your story. If you're wondering what that thing is in the middle, it's my golden nugget, all right? The first thing you have to do is decide the theme or the purpose for the story. That's the link to the golden nugget of information that you want to share. And I've worked with the experts and they say people are 100% more likely to accept and believe information when they know, like, and trust you. So that's why your story is important. People that you know, people that you meet, they'll trust you more than reading it in a book or hearing something on television. You're a real person who's been there. And the power of your story is it touches something personal in you as the storyteller, but it touches the listener as well. And as you tell a story, you relive the experience in your brain. And the scientists have found that the story activates the same area in the brain of the storyteller and the listener. So once you decide what you want to accomplish or the lesson that you want to teach, then you can say, okay, I'm ready to get started with the story. And I wanted to tell you, here's the elements that you'll see in a story. And I want you to look at movies or TV the next time. And even now, commercials are starting to have stories in them. So you can look and see whether or not it fits the pattern. And you'll see this is what they do in all great story writers. In fact, this is the pattern Steve Jobs used for his announcements, and he was such a great storyteller. So a great story has these key elements that are compelling and persuasive. So let's do the high level, then I'll give you some details. So as I said, you start with a theme or an idea, something that, and then you want something that grabs their attention, makes them want to listen. The next thing is they all have a hero or a main character. Now, it doesn't always have to be you. You might find that you're telling about somebody that you know in the story, but there's somebody that's a hero, and we want that hero to be a compelling person. And that person, right, gains an understanding or they experience personal growth as a result of what's happened to them. Then the story needs to be motivational. You see the purple one that's down here has to be motivational, which is a reason to take action. And I have a fun story to give you an example of that. I hope you'll chuckle like I did when I heard it. All right. And then good stories have some conflict or tension. Everybody has some. When you were diagnosed, right, maybe you had doubts about how your family would react, or you worried about treatment plan, or sometimes people said some things to you and it was a challenge with that, as, are you sure you have the right doctor? Are you sure you're doing this? There are conflicts that you get. And you start to think, is this treatment plan going to work for me? So it's those kinds of things. But then after that, you have the crossroad where you've done something, you made a decision, you come through the other side, and there's a value to this or a lesson. What did you gain? How did you grow since you made this decision or since you were diagnosed? Were you originally fearful, but then you move forward and now you realize that the decision you made was the right one for you? So we're going to put all of these in sequence for you, because people, as I said, people just go and then, but if you look at having the elements, it makes your story real interesting, and you find that people are leaning in and listening to what you have to say. So if you look at all the steps, what I did is I put this in the workbook. And this is based on what, as I said, I went back and forth to Hollywood for a year. And this is essentially what they use to lay out what you're going to have in a story. It's also the same thing that's used at one of the university classes that I took on storytelling. So this is in your workbook. And as you decide to tell your story, if you just pencil in the things in the form, it all comes together as a story that flows. Okay. And this is page 15. In the workbook, if you're looking for where it is. So, and if you get things into here and you need help polishing it up next time, we'll help you and say, how do we say this? How do we do this? And what I did for you is I deconstructed one of my stories. I've had cancer 4 times. So I didn't go through the long saga of all of this. What I did is broke out one of the stories, and what I deconstructed it and put notes as to the different elements of the story, where it was, here's the example of this, here's the example of that, here's this place where it makes the story good. So Peggy, this is in, we can tell everybody, this is in the chat box. So if you want to download it, you can download my story with the markups, and it's a PDF, so it's easy. It's universally printed, which makes it easy. And I think, Peggy, we're going to put it on the website too.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, next week. So don't worry about it if you missed it, but you can download it, and I put it in the Dropbox before we started. So here, this is a fun fact for you on the next one. Okay, you need to get people's attention when you start your story. Because what do you think the attention span is of normal people? Can you write in the chat box for Peggy what you think the human being's attention span is? I think this is hilarious when you hear. Peggy, we get any answers?
1 minute is what Ellen Kent said.
Okay, good, Ellen. Here's what it is.
510 seconds. Oh, Shelby's changing it. 30 seconds, Shelby's saying. 30 seconds, Cheryl Ann's saying.
Most people think that, right?
Vicky
But
says
actually,
10 seconds.
a goldfish is 9 seconds and we're 7. And people switch back and forth. They think about something else and they go to the text or they go to their phone and whatever else. So what you can, if you don't grab their attention in the first 30 seconds, so a couple people said 30 seconds, you have that long to grab their attention, but the attention span is not long. And if you don't grab it, they tune you out. So one of the secrets is dive right in. People can't resist a well-told story because it ignites their imagination. We've done that since we're kids. We're hardwired to listen to stories. You know, we've been doing it since the days of the caveman. So scientists say that our brain processes information that way. And by the way, that's how you remember it, right? So you just have to say something that grabs their attention. And when you begin, your listener isn't thinking about you or what you can do. Sometimes they have other things going on in their head. Sometimes they're creating a story about you, looking at you. Oh, I don't know what she's thinking, blah, blah. Or they may have gone down a rabbit hole about their diagnosis, and you've got to get them away from that and pay attention to the message that you have for them. So that's where saying something interesting in the beginning is helpful. One of the tips that they gave me when I went to Hollywood is, which you'll notice, watch the commercials sometimes. They drop you in the middle of the story and then back up to tell you how they got there. And that's true with movies. Did you notice some of the movies start that way before they even list who's going to be in it? Or some of the TV shows, I watch Blue Bloods, sometimes they'll do that. Or I watch Midsummer Murders, they'll do the same thing. The murder starts and then they go back and tell you how they got there. So what you can do in your story is start someplace further down the road and then say how you got there, right? And they want to identify that you want them to engage with you. And then there you are, like our hero, right? You're usually the main character. You're the one that moves the story forward, and you're the one that faces the challenges and takes action and has the personal growth. So you want them to know something about you that makes you uniquely you. So it's important for you as the hero to have a description, but also describe, if there's somebody that you have a conflict, describe the conflict person as well. So some of the things that I described was, in my story, when I got diagnosed, I was married to my second husband only for 3 years. And he had a child that passed away from cancer at 3 years old that was in his first marriage. So I'm thinking, how's he going to react? How am I going to share with him? And I had a job that I traveled all around the world doing speaking for Xerox at that time. I had gone past being a sales rep. So I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to do my job? Right. So you tell people a little bit about you to put things in context. And the hero of a great story always has fears or some internal force that makes them think they can't do it. We all use, in storytelling, they use Star Wars as the example that, oh, I can't do this. You know, the evil forces are so great. You worry about, what's the possibility of failure? What if I choose the wrong course of treatment? What if I choose the wrong help? Whatever. So there's a part of the brain that sees hope, but there's the other part of the brain keeps bugging you, going, what about this? What about that? Maybe you just like to pull up the blanket and hide and say, I just want to disappear from all of this. And you let people know you're a bit vulnerable like them. But the key thing is you had courage and you've come through it. So in the study guide, I had say something about your character. That last one was me. I told Peggy today, a friend of mine did that for a broadcast I was doing. So what's your character like? Is it happy? You see I'm happy there. Is it are you an athletic person and did this affect you because you're used to going to the gym every day and now you can't? Right? Are you young? Are you more mature? Are you anxious? Are you carefree? Give people a little bit of a picture of who their hero is. Then every story needs a spark or a motivational element. So let's look at that. Right? It's what inspired you needs strong words that connect emotionally. So what I did I crafted this for you. Page 17 has a whole list of words, and it shows the words you could choose, and then a column with a more powerful word. And that will help you because you need to have the power words to get the attention. So it's a good thing that you can use otherwise too. You might even use it at work. And people on the cancer journey are looking for information and understanding. They want to grow, but they don't want somebody to come and lecture them. They want to have the aha moment. So that's why stories are good, because when you tell it in a story context, you're not lecturing them. You're letting them have the aha moment and come to the decision, whatever it is themselves, or decide, hey, that hint was a pretty good one. I'm going to take that and use the hint that you gave me. Right? So tell them, how were you motivated? How were you inspired? And then try to inspire them. And you need to show that you succeeded, right? They want to trust that what you said is true. And for me, one of the big things when I tell stories is my friend Mary Ellen had breast cancer and she had reconstruction. And the hints and tips that she gave me and how she looked afterwards gave me a lot of hope. And so that's the kind of thing that motivated me to get a second opinion, because my first doctor didn't want to do reconstruction. But I said, wait a minute, Mary Ellen got it. I can do it. So it's that kind of thing that you want. Then this, in planning it, I want to tell you the story from this motivational speaker, which is Darren Hardy, right? Because part of motivation is having a why, having a reason why you want to do it. Some people want their why is to live to see their grandchild grow up, to see a child graduate, for someone in the family to get married. They want to take the trip of the lifetime. It gives them that power to go through something. But this is a cute little story that I like to tell that says motivation makes the difference. All right. There are two warring tribes. And so we have the lowlanders who live down in the valley, and the highlanders live through the woods and at the top of this rugged mountain. Now, one day the highlanders came down the mountain and they pillaged the lowlander village, and they took one of the babies back with them to the highland. Now, the lowlanders formed a group of the strongest and smartest men, and they set out, we're going to rescue that baby. Well, they tried to find the path to climb to the top of the mountain. But finally, the leader said, we have to give up and return to the village. We just can't do it. Then they turned around and they saw the mother. She was coming down the mountain with the baby strapped to her back. And the leader said, how did you do what the strongest and smartest men in the village couldn't do? And she said, it wasn't your baby. So you see, she had the strong why for her goal. And that's what you like to put in the stories, is that spark, what motivated you, what can motivate that person. Right. So you have on page 8, you can have a place for notes. And Peggy, I thought we should ask for minutes. Does anybody have questions?
The chat room is always open for anyone to post their questions. And if I see something coming through that I can't answer, I will be happy to break in and let you answer it.
I hope I inspire you to do your story. Don't think because there's a structure that it's hard. When you put your little details in there, you'd be surprised how easily it starts to flow together. It's just that anything that you would tell, it helps you have more of a structure and helps you use some words for impact, and not to leave out certain aspects of the story that might really make the difference. So I gave you the story planning form on here. And then let's look next. Oh, there's my conflict. All right. As we mentioned, personal growth is not as smooth as glass. Now, sometimes there are movies that they portray it that way, but that's not authentic. And I'll tell you, even when you're watching a movie, you see through it, you go, life doesn't happen like that, right? A story that's missing a conflict or challenges is not as interesting. So it might be that family member that thinks that they know best, or a well-meaning friend who wants to take over. This friend thinks you're helpless, you can't do anything. Oh, I'll just come over, run everything. Right? That gives you a bit of conflict. Wait a minute, I still want my power. I want to do my things that I can do. Right? So, and some people want to give you all different solutions, and some people put some doubt in your mind. So it all causes conflict. Right? And you wondered, would you still feel attractive and confident? Maybe you thought, I won't be able to do things I used to do. So overcoming the challenges creates the tension, but it also creates interest, and it makes your story authentic. That's one of the big things that I learned about telling stories in all the classes that I took, and from the person that I worked with in Hollywood. When you're real, your story doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have perfect words, but it has to be true. It has to be authentic, and has to have those feelings in it that you had, that, all right, there is some conflict, or there was some doubt, right? And they expect it like a good book or a good movie, right? And that helps build trust, because when you're real, it builds trust. So let's look at how I helped you. Describe how you came to the decision or take action, and you put it in the section on conflict. Here's one where people ask me. Well, I had breast cancer first, but then I had thyroid cancer. So I had to wait 6 weeks to get the top thyroid surgeon at Johns Hopkins. And people were saying to me, how can you wait 6 weeks? You have breast cancer before. You got to get something done tomorrow. Hurry up. It doesn't matter where you have it. Get it done right away. Why risk it? But my surgeon said, thyroid cancer is slow growing. There's no problem. You can wait for me. And I had to trust him. But you can see that that was a conflict with people saying that to me, even family members saying something to me, right? And so when I tell the story, it makes it real to know, hey, people did say this. There could be inner, there could be outer conflicts, could be advice of friends, could be financial issues that give you a conflict. Should I do this? Should I spend the money and travel here? Whatever. So note some conflicts and then say, here's what I was facing. Here's some of the fears. Here's some of the things people said. And here's how I dealt with it. Because the important thing in the story for the listener is, how did you deal with it? That's what helps them, because then they know how they can deal with it. Now, all stories, watch, every movie, every book has a crossroad. It's the point where the decision's been made, action takes place, and if you don't do something, the risk's going to increase, or it's going to become more difficult for you. But this is where your personal growth really begins. You've faced the conflict, you've gained some insight, might have a vision of the future. I wanted more time with my family. I had a lot of opportunities at my job, so I wanted to be sure that I could have the treatment that I wanted and feel confident. And that's why in the first case, I made a decision for a second opinion. In the second case, I waited to go to Johns Hopkins. So it's that crossroad where you have that confidence in yourself. And if you can communicate that in your story to somebody else, it helps them have that inner courage to make decisions that they have to make. I like this. You're like a butterfly, right? There's a monarch, right? Post-traumatic growth, right? Transformation It's the positive changes that you make after a stressful event. This is what happens after you have an understanding and you take action. You're never the same after this happens to you. You have insights, you've grown. Peggy and I talked about taking your power back and about not dealing with some things that you might have accepted or dealt with before. Could you say, I'm not taking that anymore. I'm not dealing with this. Or you view certain situations in life different. I look at what Peggy was telling about afterwards. You see these people with road rage and you think, why are you doing this for 5 minutes of difference? Be glad you're here, right, Peggy? In my case, I was happy to be with my family. And it's been a long time now, and I feel very confident that I'm past all of this, that I faced the situation. And I'm grateful that I can help other cancer patients and I can be empathetic. And I know I've been dedicated ever since I recovered. I've been dedicated to helping other people. And I feel like I can help them know that they're not alone. Did you know that 79% of survivors report that they have a benefit from their cancer journey and sharing a story? I thought that was interesting, that when I looked up the research, that it comes back and it helps you when you see that you've helped somebody else by sharing your story, saying, this was my insight, or this is a hint and tip that I can give you that this might help you. Just easy things. Peggy, I love our other thing that we found out that was just so helpful, is telling a story about how we put on trash bags with duct tape to take a shower because you couldn't get wet. And now you can tell the story and you can buy a shower shirt and you don't have to deal with trash bags with duct tape. And somebody listening would say, oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. I read one yesterday. Here's an easy thing. All the tubes that you have hanging that first come home, what are you doing with that? They said, get one of the lanyards that you use for work that has your name badge and put the safety pins onto the lanyard and it holds up the tubes. Just little stories with hints and tips make a world of difference to people. And then in screenwriting, after that, it's the value of your story. The end is called the denouement, which means the climax, the end of the story. When they understand what action you took and what was the outcome, they have a takeaway that they can apply to their life. And how will it add value to their life? What's the takeaway lesson? Or for you, what was the purpose that you told the story? Did you want them to see the surgeon that their gynecologist recommended and they're putting stuff off? Or maybe they need to talk to some other survivors because they need to build up their confidence? Or telling some of the things like I just told you that Peggy and I have found helpful to people? Or maybe it's, I love Peggy had a little story about laughing. In the midst of all of this, you still have to have friends that'll help you have a laugh. It can't be all sadness every day. And just a story about that and just helping somebody have a laugh is important. One of the things that's important is to be clear and concise, not to ramble. So use words that generate emotion and enthusiasm. Just a short, what's in it for them in the message. Now, I have a couple little hints and tips for you because I like this. And this is something that I've studied a lot about and I learned, and it's very interesting, applies to a lot more than just our stories here. Visions and emotions and stories reach out and connect with the right side of the brain. And that's the side that people make a decision. So whether you're making a decision about what you have to do, what you think the person should do for cancer, or you need this for a personal decision, use this. It's the right side of the brain that makes the decision, and it's the left side that's analytical, logical, that justifies what you're doing. And I jokingly say, I want this new pair of shoes and they're too expensive. And that's my right brain. The left brain tells me about all the benefit I'm going to get out of having them. So I can say, okay, I'll buy these shoes. but it's just really interesting to see which side of the brain, which is why I have that list on page 17. Everything on the right side is what helps the brain to make the decision. Everything on the left side is just something that will justify it. And if you look at movies or you look at the commercials, they will use right brain words to convince you that you want it, and then they'll justify it with the left brain. It's just real interesting to see this, and been a lot of studies done on it. In fact, that's how I told salespeople to sell. Use all your right brain words. And there have been some people with multi-million-dollar deals. There's one that I read a book about, that this guy that owns casinos in Las Vegas, the first time he proposed this casino, which is going to be absolute fantastic, and he made the presentation, the dollars were there. He did all left brain with all money and all that kind of stuff, and the investors weren't in. He did another group of investors, and all he did was tell the story, and he didn't even get the story totally done, and everybody said, I'm in, I don't care what it costs, I'm in. It's because it was right brain. So it's interesting. You want something at home, tell your story with right brain words. Okay. And this, put the senses in. Right? You want to make it even more interesting. It'll make it come to life. So let me give you an example. Maybe the hospital was cold. Maybe it had an antiseptic smell to it, that you felt all alone. That kind of thing helps. You know, maybe for a certain length of time, I got radioactive iodine, so nobody could touch me. So there's no sense of touch. It's that kind of a thing. Did chemo make your meals have metal mouth? Right? Maybe some things have bad smell to them. Whatever. So use some of the senses, and if you can, that helps you with your story because it creates a clearer vision. I'm sure you can think of a lot of examples afterwards, but start thinking about things where you could use your senses. And then, Peggy, I need a drink of water for a second.
Go ahead.
Then this is what I suggest you do. Use the form, write your story, and then give some feedback from friends or from a family. Use your notes, make a draft, and then share your story. And get to the point that you love your own story. By the way, if you want to just do it, filming it, you can use your iPad or your phone, film yourself, and then use that to watch yourself and write it, and even tell, oh, I didn't do this, or I did do that. So it's helpful. I helped one of my friends do that. We just used the iPad and filmed her, and then went back and wrote up the information. So think about that, and then we can help you. I gave you, this is a form based on how I was evaluated when I went to storytelling class. So I know this is structured, but it gives you a guideline or idea of things to look for when you're telling a story. If you give it to your family or you give it to a friend and say, hey, could you take a look at it? Or even if you film yourself, evaluate yourself using the form and say, did I do this? An interesting thing, by the way, I've done it, and I know my husband was a great salesperson. He's done it, is film yourself and then watch yourself without the audio on. And then you can see how much you're communicating with your body language. And sometimes we've watched people that are great speakers on video or on TV and turn the sound off just so we can see their body movements for it. Which is interesting, because a lot of information is communicated when you tell a story by your body movements. It's body language. But get ready to share it. People want to see, they want to hear your energy, their passion. They want to be inspired by the story that you tell, and they are grateful for any hints and tips that you can provide to make their journey easier. Something that you learned by what you went through, little hints and tips can be so helpful.